In June 1952, Chinese soldiers brutally ambushed Army medic David B. Bleak and 20 other men on the crest of Hill 499 in Korea. Several American soldiers were instantly ravaged by machine gun fire. Bleak rushed to their aid, only to run into 2 Chinese soldiers peering out from a trench, ready to strike. At 6'5" and weighing 250 pounds, this reportedly gentle giant would soon make the communists regret their decision. Bleak's blood began to boil. He bolted toward the trench and threw himself in, ignoring the bullets whizzing inches from his face. Muddy and unarmed, the giant medic tackled the 2 smaller enemy soldiers, forcing them to the ground. Then, in a furious trance, he gave the neck of one of the men a brutal twist with his bare hands before going after the other. As he tried to catch his breath, an enemy grenade landed a couple of feet away from a fellow American soldier. He threw himself on top of his comrade, trying to shield him from the live explosive. If this was the end, he wanted to meet it saving lives, not taking them. The war in Korea seemed to be approaching its grand finale. For David B. Bleak, who had dropped out of school in Idaho in 1950 to train as a combat medic, it felt like he might never see actual combat. The tide of battle appeared to be turning swiftly in favor of the United Nations coalition. Recent US-led successes, like the audacious amphibious landing at Incheon and the ensuing brutal counteroffensive that forced North Korean forces into retreat, hinted at a quick victory. Yet everything shifted when Chinese troops joined the fray in late 1950. As UN forces were pushed back past the 38th parallel, the war transformed. It grew more violent, more chaotic, and stretched on far longer than anyone had predicted. It was here that Bleak would finally find a chance to prove himself in battle. Bleak was an imposing figure at 250 pounds and 6 feet 5 inches, but those who knew him back home always spoke of his humble and quiet nature. Fitting his kind and helpful persona, Bleak was assigned to be a combat medic. Even when he was not tasked with direct combat, he was eager to use his calm composure and cool demeanor to help his fellow soldiers in their most desperate moments. By the time Bleak shipped out to Korea, the front lines had solidified into a grinding routine of trench warfare, with each side viciously contesting the same barren stretches of ground. The once erratic strides made by both sides had slowed to a brutal slog. It was 1952, and the war had already claimed over 30,000 American lives, with tens of thousands more wounded or missing. South Korean, Chinese, and North Korean casualties were mounting alarmingly. With more men being wounded, medics like Bleak became critical, saving the lives of soldiers trapped in the treacherous strands of dirt separating one trench from another. Bleak quickly built a reputation as a diligent and capable medic, earning a promotion to staff sergeant and a place with the 2nd Battalion, 223rd Infantry. But beneath his gentle exterior, Bleak harbored a deep primal rage that no one had suspected. In the early hours of June 14, 1952, a small U.S. patrol crept out from their lines, moving north into enemy territory shrouded by total darkness. They were tasked with probing Chinese positions and capturing prisoners for interrogation. Among the 20 men in the group was David Bleak, who had volunteered for the dangerous task. They headed towards Hill 499, a barren, treacherous rise where Chinese forces had entrenched themselves. As the small team advanced through the darkness and eerie silence, F Company, 223rd Infantry, deployed a loud and explosive attack just to the west of Bleak's position to serve as a diversion and keep the 20-man unit concealed. The effect of the distraction was short-lived, however, and as the men were about to reach the summit of the hill, they were detected by enemy scouts. Heavy Chinese automatic fire ripped into them, striking the lead soldiers. Chaos erupted as the darkness became intermittently interrupted by muzzle flashes. Bleak, positioned at the rear, charged forward through vaulting men and screams. Without hesitation, he began treating the injured, working deftly despite the chaos surrounding him. He stabilized the wounded as best he could, then pressed on, urging the remaining men up the hill. But they had barely advanced when another burst of machine gun fire tore through one of his teammates and pinned down the entire team. Instinctively, Bleak covered and began to treat the injured man. But the enemy fire kept coming. This time, it came from a trench ahead where Chinese soldiers lay in wait. Knowing he wouldn't be able to help the injured soldier under direct enemy fire, or for that matter anyone else, while the Chinese position remained, he decided to take action into his own hands. A raw, primal rage overtook him, and he launched himself into the trench as the enemy tried to reload the machine gun. He quickly grappled with the first Chinese soldier he encountered. With brutal strength and leveraging his massive size, he snapped the man's neck. A second soldier lunged at Bleak from the back, but he reacted just as quickly, grabbing the enemy by the throat. The medic was now in a trance. He felt unstoppable. A third enemy appeared and tried to knock Bleak down with the butt of his rifle. But for the American soldier, his moves felt slow and clumsy. Before the enemy struck, he unsheathed his combat knife, then tossed him aside. The trench was secured, and Bleak returned to his patrol. He worked to stabilize the wounded men again, but there was no time for rest. A concealed enemy trooper hurled a grenade. It bounced off a soldier's helmet, landing at the feet of one of Bleak's squad buddies. In an incredible demonstration of bravery and selflessness, Bleak threw himself on the soldier, shielding him with his body. The grenade exploded, but miraculously, neither man was seriously injured. Gravity seemed to vanish as dust and debris elevated, just to rain down around them with violent force, but both soldiers were able to continue their mission. Bleak's unit was able to capture several Chinese soldiers before beginning their descent back to safety from the accursed hill. The return, however, would prove just as dangerous as the ascent. The men moved swiftly down Hill 499 when Chinese personnel unleashed a new ambush from a nearby trench. Automatic rifle fire caught 3 of the men, who went down immediately, wounded. Bleak raced toward them, bullets whizzing past, but before he could reach them, his luck ran out, and a round struck his leg. He stumbled, but pushed on, limping toward the injured men. Ignoring the maddening throbbing of his leg, the medic tended to the injuries of his comrades, working as methodically and focused as if he were unharmed, even as the firefight continued to unravel around him. One of Bleak's friends was gravely injured, totally incapacitated. Bleak, grimacing through the pain in his leg, hoisted the man onto his shoulders and carried him. As they made their way down the hill, Bleak suddenly found himself face to face with 2 more Chinese soldiers. He set down the wounded man and allowed the fury to overtake him once more. The Chinese soldiers fired at other Americans as Bleak charged at them, and in one smooth motion, slammed their heads together, sending them sprawling to the ground. With the path cleared, he lifted his comrade once again, pushing forward until finally they reached the safety of United Nations lines. All 20 men of the patrol made it back, but several were wounded. Bleak's actions had saved the lives of his brothers in arms, and they had been witness to his incredible exploits. He had eliminated at least 5 Chinese soldiers, shielded a fellow soldier from a grenade blast, and carried a wounded man through enemy fire, all while wounded himself. The price for his heroics was nerve damage from the gunshot wound to his leg. Bleak required hospitalization, but returned to duty less than a month later on July 9th. His time in Korea ended shortly thereafter, and he finished his enlistment in Japan. For his heroic actions on Hill 499, Bleak was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Eisenhower at the White House in October 1953. After retiring from the Army as a staff sergeant, his combat experience would go down as one of the most extraordinary battlefield stories in modern military history.